Hey guys, tonight we slip into the silk-stitched chaos of Byzantium, where a single color could make you ruler or ruin you. You're not just anyone tonight. You're born into royalty, cradled inside the porphyra, the famous purple chamber, of Constantinople's grand palace. Walls of porphyry stone glow under soft torchlight. Midwives whisper prayers in Greek, and a royal scribe already dips his quill to record your name alongside emperors and saints. Your first wail is probably out of existential dread. The chamber is rarefied, sacred. Only emperors' children are born here. This isn't just a room, it's a destiny. You are porphyrogenitos, born in the purple, which sounds prestigious, until you realize it's also a gilded bullseye. From the moment your swaddling cloth brushes imperial silk, everyone, including some very ambitious relatives, is quietly wondering how to not let you grow up. Your nursemaid gently coos lullabies, probably while also writing letters to your politically savvy aunt. One of your uncles sends you a tiny gold cross. How sweet. Another uncle sends a very large, suspiciously well-paid tutor to monitor your development. Yes, baby, you're already under surveillance. The empire adores a good tradition, and you're a living one. Every item surrounding you is ceremonial. The cushion you rest on was stitched by palace nuns, your bathwater blessed by a bishop, and your baby food might contain saffron, which you'll promptly spit up onto a marble floor. Meanwhile, beyond your velvet curtain, the empire simmers with tension, border skirmishes, theological schisms, a bishop accused of turning wine back into water. All typical Thursday stuff. Historians still argue whether being born in the purple chamber truly secured loyalty from the people, or if it just made you a target for intrigue the moment you learned to crawl. What's certain is this: the robe isn't just a color, it's a contract. And already, things feel heavy. Even your wooden crib is painted purple. Purple, purple, purple. Did we mention it was imperially exclusive? Anyone else caught wearing it could lose a hand. It's a felony dye. Outside your chamber, the empress wipes her brow. The emperor accepts congratulations while mentally revising the will. And one senator's already scheming how to marry his son into your future court. Oh, the joys of noble infancy. You're passed from one robed functionary to the next, none of whom make eye contact for more than 2 seconds, some out of respect, some because they're calculating how long it might take to groom your cousin as a backup heir. But for now, you sleep, swaddled in lamb's wool, forehead kissed by a eunuch who silently served 5 emperors and buried 4 of them. He knows things. He watches as your chest rises and falls. In his mind, he's already writing your future. 2 betrayals, 1 exile, and a suspiciously convenient hunting accident. Still tonight, you're just a baby in a palace of gold, born beneath mosaics of Christ Pantocrator and enormous eyes that seem to follow your cradle from every tiled surface. Sleep tight, little emperor. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your city and what time it is for you. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Time slinks forward. You're a toddler now, toddling well, not exactly. More like solemnly processed around the palace by a team of minders. You're always dressed for ceremony, even during teething. One senator tells you a bedtime story and ends it with a lesson on property inheritance laws. Another teaches you to sign your name before you learn how to count to 5. Your playpen is next to a marble fountain shaped like an eagle choking a lion. Cute. You begin to notice that adults don't smile when you enter a room. They bow, or flinch, or immediately begin speaking Greek in far more complicated clauses than necessary. It dawns on you, your birth wasn't a beginning, it was a chess move. And you're the fancy new bishop piece. The palace smells like beeswax, rosewater, and secrets. You overhear things like he's the legitimate heir, and, "But what about Theodosio's boy?" whispered from behind golden screens. Sometimes you're paraded through the streets in a tiny chariot while citizens toss olive branches at your feet and pretend not to notice the guards scanning the rooftops. And always, always, you're watched. Guards at every hallway, testers for your food. A monk who follows you from room to room and claims he's praying, but you suspect he's writing an epic poem about your diaper changes. Still, life isn't all doom. You get the Empire's best tutors, finest toys, and more ceremonial swords than most small kingdoms. You once receive a baby rhino from the ruler of Nubia. It's adorable until it eats a tax ledger. But even that, moment hilarious as it is, feels symbolic. Everyone laughs too hard, glances too much at one another. Because in this world, nothing is ever just funny, especially not when you're dressed in purple. You're 5 and your tutors are terrifying. Not in the way ordinary children fear multiplication tables or the occasional stern schoolmaster. No, your educators are a specially curated blend of scholars, priests, eunuchs, and one man who only ever answers questions with questions, which is infuriating when all you want is to know whether horses dream. The palace appoints each tutor not just to educate you, but to subtly shape the kind of emperor you'll become. You learn your letters not with cute rhymes, but by tracing ancient decrees that once sent rebellious governors into permanent retirement. Your arithmetic lessons come via tax codes. Nothing says childhood fun like calculating how many solidi you can extract from a farmer in Cappadocia without starting a revolt. And then there's Philos, your logician. He's got a beard that makes him look like he's always halfway through transforming into a mountain goat. He tells you stories of Plato, explains how shadows can be deceiving, and occasionally mutters that everything's a simulation. He also insists the empire is an illusion held together by metaphors and wine. You think he might be cursed. One day, he brings a loaf of bread to your lesson and speaks to it for 45 minutes. The next day, the Empress reports strange dreams about flaming doves. No one connects the two events officially, but the kitchen now employs a taster for carbs. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine elite sincerely believed in such omens, or merely used them as plausible excuses to dodge accountability. You, however, are beginning to suspect that superstition is just a fancy word for palace logic. Then there's your theological instructor, Bishop Etios. He believes in God, but he believes even more in you knowing every minute variation of doctrine. By age 6, you can quote entire councils. Unfortunately, you still struggle to tie your shoes. Etios insists this is symbolic. Master your soul, and the sandals will follow, he tells you, while handing you a treatise on monothelitism. You nod, pretend to understand, and hide the pamphlet under your cushion, where it remains for the next 12 years. Your favorite teacher, surprisingly, is Makar the eunuch. He doesn't talk much, but he teaches you how to move through the palace without being noticed, a skill that comes in handy when you accidentally spill ink on a mosaic and need plausible deniability. He also knows every secret passage in the Byzantine Palace, including one that leads to a surprisingly cozy chamber where someone once carved an entire epic about a dolphin into the wall. Makar once catches you mimicking the way senators puff out their chests during court. Instead of scolding you, he chuckles and shows you how to do it properly, adding, "If you're going to be a puppet, at least be convincing." That's the closest anyone's ever come to telling you the truth. Your world is steeped in ritual and performance. Even your daily walk is a procession. You pass columns of advisors in identical robes, their scrolls tucked like daggers under their arms. Their eyes flick toward you, not with warmth, but with calculation. You're being measured. Not in hugs or lullabies, but in potential civil wars. Sometimes your studies are interrupted by real-world drama. A noble arrives from the provinces, bringing gifts and a veiled complaint about the price of wheat. You're told to listen and observe, which you do, before accidentally asking if the noble's mustache is a sign of allegiance to the Armenians. The court laughs. The noble does not. Still, you're absorbing everything. Like a sponge dipped in ceremonial oil, you soak up etiquette, treachery, and just enough Latin to pretend you're paying attention when the old senators start rambling about the glory of Rome. You learn that loyalty is always conditional, and everyone worships power, even the ones who claim to only serve God. You're also learning how to lie. You learn to smile when someone calls you divinely chosen, even though you've overheard them calling you the sticky-nosed puppet prince after too much mead. You thank guests for gifts you didn't want, praise paintings you don't understand, and once had to give a speech thanking your cousin for punching you, in the spirit of imperial bonding. Ah yes, dash cousins. They single quotes re everywhere. The imperial family tree is less a straight line and more a grapevine that's been stepped on by a particularly energetic goat. You have second cousins who claim the throne, fourth cousins who claim divine visions, and at least one eighth cousin who shows up wearing a robe far too purple for comfort. Falah says, to know yourself is wisdom. To know your cousins is survival. You're starting to believe him. One day, during your copywork, a page from an illuminated manuscript depicts your great-grandfather stabbing someone named Nikephoros in the thigh during a prayer meeting. You ask if that was a metaphor. Your tutor just shrugs and says, probably not. History, you're realizing, is personal. It's written in your bloodline, chiseled into palace stone, whispered in the corridors between psalm readings. The empire runs not on gears or parchment, but on the unspoken tension between breakfast and betrayal, and the robes. Always the robes, folded, perfumed, pressed, purple like dried figs left too long in the sun, a color reserved for only you. And maybe, one day, the man who kills you, you yawn. Your head swims with theological disputes, contradictory edicts, and a poem you were forced to memorize that compared emperors to gleaming fishnets. You didn't get it, but you will. One day. For now, sleep comes. You dream of robes that ripple like water, thrones that spin when sat upon, and tutors who gently nod as you float away from the porphyra chamber toward something. What was it? Oh right, destiny. You're 10 now, and your birthday celebration is an opera of awkward vows and veiled threats. There's music. Of course, a chorus of eunuchs chanting in Greek, so harmonized it makes your molars tingle. There are gifts, jewel-encrusted goblets, mechanical birds, even a snowball from Mount Olympus preserved in some clever alchemical flask. And there are relatives, so many relatives, all of them smiling too wide, all of them offering to help you practice governance. You sit on a raised dais while your cousin Alexios tells a joke about imperial taxes that lands a little too well. Everyone laughs except your food taster, who has the social skills of a rock and the reflexes of a hawk. He gives Alexios a look that says, try it, and I will gladly dive into your breakfast. Historians still argue whether Byzantine politics were more driven by protocol or paranoia, but you're beginning to see there's no difference. Every gesture has layers, every smile a sharp underside. You catch whispers between bites of honey-glazed lamb. Someone's talking about a prophecy. The purple-born boy will fall before the fruit harvest, says one courtier. Maybe it refers to Alexios, says another. You glance at the fruit bowl. It's mostly figs. You suddenly feel very unsafe. Around figs. Later that night, you sneak into the Hall of Maps, a huge domed chamber filled with faded parchments, gold-threaded banners, and a globe that spins with a soft squeak. You trace your finger across distant lands, Alonia, Khorasan, Aquitaine, lands with fewer cousins you imagine. And then, a flicker of candlelight catches your eye. Behind a curtain, you see him, your second cousin Demetrios, with a falcon on. his arm and the smug grin of someone who's definitely practicing his coronation speech in the mirror. You freeze. He doesn't. He walks right up and offers you a date-stuffed sweetmeat. You take it reluctantly. There's room for 2 emperors. He whispers. You're not sure if he's lying or just bad at math. From that day on, everything changes. You no longer feel safe during family visits. When Aunt Iulia hugs you, you discreetly check for daggers. When your older cousin Basil offers to play chess, you inspect the board for poison dust. You even start asking Philos cryptic questions. Like, if someone shares my blood, but not my vision, can we truly share a crown? He answers by giving you a turtle. This is not a metaphor. You receive a live turtle in a lacquered box. On its shell is carved the word hypomon, patience. Philos tells you that it's a lesson. The turtle survives because it cannot be rushed, and it bites when it must. You name the turtle Theodoros and carry him around in your sleeve. It's the only thing that keeps your nerves steady during palace dinners where your relatives smile while discussing succession stability. There's an odd moment at one of these banquets where Demetrios starts talking about hunting trips. Specifically, how accidents happen in the forest. Everyone chuckles politely. You excuse yourself and walk straight into a wall. It's fine. Better a bruised forehead than an accidental archery mishap. Soon, you notice something else. Parrots. 3 different relatives have taken to owning exotic birds from India, and all of them seem capable of mimicking court gossip. One of them, no joke, repeats the phrase, "Long live the new emperor," in Greek every morning at sunrise. The bird belongs to Alexios. You ask your tutor if birds can be tried for treason. He says no, but they can be confiscated for royal use. The next day, you order the parrot relocated to the monastery aviary. It dies mysteriously a week later. You don't talk about it, but at night you dream of purple feathers falling like snow. There's also a subtle shift in how servants behave around you. Some become more reverent, others more aloof. One chambermaid no longer makes eye contact. A stable boy once bows so low he almost faceplants into a decorative urn. It all smells like preparation. One morning, you wake to find your favorite guard reassigned to fortify the Western Palace. When you ask why, no one answers. But you hear murmurs. Demetrios is building his own private guard, funded by inheritance money. You try not to panic, but you start sleeping with a dagger under your pillow wrapped in lavender, so the nurses won't notice. Philos gives you another riddle. When the tree is ripe, everyone brings baskets. But beware the ones who bring axes. You ask for clarification. He just smiles and offers you a peach. You don't eat it. The next week, you're invited to a lakeside picnic. Sounds innocent enough, except that the host is your cousin Basil. And the last time someone went boating with him, they ended up missing at sea. You fake a fever. It works. You're starting to understand. Survival isn't about strength, it's about timing, like your turtle. Or like the peacocks in the imperial gardens who always flap dramatically but never fly. Still, your days continue. Lessons, ceremonies, obligatory prayers, occasional dreams of being devoured by a robe. Sometimes, you wish you could just be a monk or a baker, or literally anything that didn't involve people planning your transition to glory. Then one evening, while you're studying coin engravings, Macker whispers in your ear, "There's been a new will. You're not the sole heir anymore." Your hand freezes on the coin. It features your face, but you realize with a chill that it's slightly off. A little less you, a little more Demetrios. The mint has made a batch. An accidental misprint, they say. Happens all the time, Don. Of course it does. You place the coin under your pillow that night, next to your dagger. You don't sleep well. You're 13 when they finally let you wear it. The robe, not just any robe, the robe. Imperial purple, made from thousands of murex snails crushed into oblivion for just a few grams of dye. The fabric feels heavier than chainmail, though. It glides like water across your shoulders. Embroidered with golden thread and lined in silk, it whispers when you walk and announces your presence before you even speak. The robe smells faintly of incense, beeswax, and anticipation. You glance at yourself in the polished bronze mirror. You look regal. You also look incredibly conspicuous. You've gone from anxious princeling to official bullseye. Everyone notices. When you step into the hall of Chrysotriclinos, courtiers bow deeper. Advisors murmur titles with forced reverence. Even the guards, typically stone-faced, blink more than usual. The robe isn't just a garment, it's a declaration. You've crossed a threshold. You are no longer the potential heir. You are now a problem to anyone with ambitions. The moment you leave the room, you hear whispers. Too young, says one. Too bold, says another. One senator squints at the hem of your robe like it might explode. Historians still argue whether the practice of donning imperial purple was truly sacred or just convenient branding. But you feel the transformation. Viscerally, the robe binds you tighter than any oath. It turns every smile into a chess move and every shadow into suspicion. You've become a walking metaphor, and worse, you're aware of it. At court assemblies, you now sit beside the emperor, your father, for now on a slightly lower throne. The elevation difference is symbolic, they say. You quietly note it. Just high enough for someone to fall off backward during a toast. Noted, you practice speeches. You learn how to hold a scepter without looking like you're auditioning for a Greek tragedy. You develop an expression that says divine authority while suppressing teenage existential crisis. And the robe is always there. You wear it during religious ceremonies, standing under a canopy of gold while bishops chant in 16-part harmony. You wear it to blessing rituals where you're doused in enough holy oil to fry a small fish. You even wear it during inspections of the grain silos because nothing says economic stability like sweating in velvet among sacks of wheat. And yet, despite the performance, the people adore it. Children wave from balconies. Merchants offer you garlands. Monks nod solemnly as though recognizing the glow of divine right. And every time the robe gleams in the sunlight like a moving miracle. It's working. That's the problem. One night, you catch your cousin Basil staring at you. During Vespers, he's not blinking. His hands are clasped, but the grip is tight enough to crush walnuts. After the service, he approaches. You look the part, he says. Thanks. You reply. There's a long pause. Just remember, he murmurs. Purple bleeds like any other dye. You spend the rest of the evening mentally cataloging exits from the chapel. Still, there are perks. The robe opens doors literally and figuratively. You get access to treasury ledgers, secret council meetings, and once, to a hidden library beneath the Hagia Sophia that smells like eternity. Macher finds you there reading a treatise on flood dreams and mutters, "Careful. Knowledge stains deeper than blood." You don't ask what he means. You're too distracted by a passage noting that in the last century alone, 12 men who wore the robe died under mysterious circumstances. Only 2 died in bed. One of those reportedly choked on a fig. You no longer eat figs. By your 14th birthday, the robe becomes a second skin. You stop noticing the itch of gold thread at your neck or the constant weight on your shoulders. What you do notice is how your friends stop calling you by name. You're your grace now. Or most auspicious one. Even your turtle, Theodoros, starts getting letters addressed to his serene shellness. At a spring festival, you're seated on a palanquin carried by 6 guards. As you wave to the crowd, a voice rings out from somewhere high above. Don't trip over the prophecy. Laughter, nervous glances. And then silence. No one knows who said it. That night, a patrol searches every rooftop. Nothing. You lie awake in your chamber, robe hung carefully beside your bed, torchlight dancing across its folds. You wonder, Did the robe make you important? Or did it just make you easier to find? The next week, something curious happens. A minor noble from Paphlagonia arrives with a gift, a miniature icon of Saint Demetrius, framed in purple cloth. It's odd. Saint Demetrius is the patron of soldiers. Not emperors, not heirs. You accept it politely. That night, the cloth disappears from your desk. You find it later in a brazier, half burned, with a note pinned to it that reads, "Saints, don't save the proud." You don't sleep at all after that. Macker notices the bags under your eyes. He takes you on a detour during your morning procession, past a broken marble statue in the old garden courtyard. Its inscription reads, Nikephoros, two born in glory. Fell at night. You say nothing, he says. He wore the robe too. Still, the next day, the rituals resume. The robe is pressed, perfumed, placed on you by gloved attendants. You lift your chin as it settles onto your shoulders. You straighten the collar. You step forward. You are the empire. Or at least, the part of it most likely to be stabbed by family. The weight of tradition is heavier than gold. You carry it. For now, but you've begun to dream not of thrones or triumphs, but of robes that unravel, thread by thread, until all that's left is you, alone and finally free. You're 15, and dinner is a high-risk activity. Gone are the carefree days of warm bread and olive oil. These days, every meal is a potential murder mystery in 4 courses. You sit down to roasted lamb, pickled olives, and saffron-dusted. Barley and your food taster tries each dish like he's auditioning for a one-man tragedy. You watch his throat, his face, his pulse. He swallows, waits, nods. Only then do you lift your spoon. Your tutors still teach. The court still bows, but now everyone seems more cautious around you. Not out of respect, out of calculation. Because once you wore the robe, you didn't just signal readiness, you broadcasted threat. And threats must be resolved. Tonight's banquet is in honor of your mother's cousin from Trebizond. He brings salted fish, sharp questions, and a mysterious honey cake that absolutely no one touches. Your cousin Demetrios is present, lounging in an embroidered chair, swirling his wine with the enthusiasm of someone who may or may not be lacing it with rhubarb root. The emperor, your father, is seated at the head of the table, but even he glances at his goblet more than usual. His beard is grayer this week. His hands tremble slightly when reaching for fruit. You notice everything now. You have to. Historians still argue whether Byzantine poisonings were as common as chroniclers claimed, or simply overblown to add drama to otherwise dull feasts. You've seen enough sudden illnesses, enough mysteriously empty chairs, to know that subtlety is a deadly sport in this empire. And kitchens are its coliseum. Earlier this month, the master chef was reassigned to a monastery after a noble fell ill from fennel overdose. Fennel, that's now a banned word in your dining hall. To keep yourself alert, you start learning about herbs. Not for healing, oh no, for defense. You learn which spices numb the tongue, which roots cause sweating, which flowers induce forgetfulness. Your notes are disguised as a theological treatise on divine flavor. The bishop blesses it. At breakfast, you pretend to savor honeyed figs, but you're watching your cupbearer's knuckles. They twitch. You quietly swap your cup with the servant's. The servant survives. You give him a raise, but not everything is poison. Sometimes the danger comes in compliments, like the general who tells you, you carry yourself like Basil II, which is lovely until you recall Basil II strangled his rivals with piano wire and ate alone for 20 years. You smile, thank him, and decide not to invite him to your birthday, or the merchant who praises your robust constitution. Translation: it'd be a shame if someone ruined that with hemlock. Your safest meals are taken in the monastery garden, where Macker arranges for bread, dates, and goat cheese to be served by monks too old to hold grudges. Even then, you nibble like a cat suspicious of its own tail. And then there's the wine. It's everywhere. Every toast, every gathering, every solemn announcement seems to come with a goblet of deep red mystery. You swear the wine is darker than usual, lately almost purple-black, like ink that stains forever. You stop drinking it entirely. You develop a convincing fake sip maneuver. Macker calls it your imperial kiss. You practice it in the mirror until it looks effortless. Your paranoia peaks during the spring equinox, when a visiting bishop presents you with a fruit tart shaped like Constantinople. It's elaborate. It's beautiful. It contains exactly 11 pomegranate seeds. Philos takes one look and says, "You know, in some traditions that number calls death." You push the tart off the table with one finger. It falls. No one breathes. Then, a cat of indeterminate ownership slinks out and devours it without hesitation. The cat dies the next day. You don't ask where it's buried. But it's not just your food that's a risk. The act of eating itself has become theatrical. You must appear strong, gracious, poised, never greedy, never anxious. You must chew with imperial rhythm, sip with ceremonial weight, nod when appropriate, smile when required. Even your hiccups are subject to interpretation. One false cough and the chamberlain might assume a coup is underway. At a small gathering, your cousin Basil, yes, the throne lurker, tries to get you drunk. He pushes a goblet toward you. You smile, lift it, swirl, sniff, and then accidentally sneeze into the cup. A servant whisks it away before Basil can recover his disappointment. You thank your sinuses. They may have saved your life. Later, you hear rumors. Someone was seen sneaking into the kitchens. A spice jar was missing. A steward suddenly requested medical leave in a province 300 miles away. No one says your name, but you know it's always hovering in the background like smoke. You consider fasting. You really do. Then, Macaire brings you roasted chestnuts with sea salt and that sour goat cheese from the monastery cellar, the one that tastes like old sandals but somehow comforts you. He eats the first bite, then waits that you eat the rest. That night, you dream of simpler times, peasant meals by a hearth, hands reaching for bread without suspicion, laughter that doesn't scan for treachery. You wonder what it's like to eat without thinking, without calculating, without flinching at shadows. You wake before dawn. Light filters through the curtains like ghostly fingers. You rise, dress in your now familiar layers of silk and armor-threaded undergarments, and stare at the breakfast tray. Boiled eggs, bread, honey, grapes. You eat none of it. Instead, you write a note. Just 3 words. New taster. Immediately. You seal it with wax, stamp it with your signet, and hand it to Macaire. He nods once, already understanding. After all, in Byzantium, food isn't nourishment. It's negotiation. You're 16, and the throne is behaving strangely, not metaphorically, literally. At first, it's a whisper from an old guard, something about the automated lion in the throne room growling at the wrong person. You think it's a joke until you see it. The imperial throne, seat of God's chosen on earth, is not just a fancy chair. It's a mechanical masterpiece, a Byzantine fever dream of gold, levers, and hissing hydraulics. The lion statues flanking it, they roar. The birds behind it, they chirp in terrifyingly accurate tones. The throne itself can rise, rotate, and if legend is to be believed, tilt forward slightly to eject particularly disrespectful diplomats. And now, it's your turn to sit. You approach it slowly during a court reception. The room falls silent. Robes rustle. A priest clears his throat. You place your hand on the lion's head. It emits a low RKK sound, somewhere between a growl and a mechanical indigestion. You sit. The seat hisses. Somewhere behind you, a golden peacock flaps its wings like it's stuck in a loop. Everyone stares. You do not move. Then, with the quiet drama of a seasoned stagehand, the throne rises an inch. The gasps are theatrical, rehearsed. But your heart races anyway, because historians still argue whether the throne's movements were symbolic, or if some emperor actually commissioned it to intimidate visiting dignitaries, or maybe just to feel taller. It doesn't matter now. You're on it, and it's warm, oddly warm, which is concerning, because that usually means someone has recently been on it. You glance sideways. The eunuch steward avoids your gaze. You make a mental note. Check the roster of who had throne access after Vespers. You shift slightly. The throne shifts back. You try not to yelp. Later, Philos finds you in the palace library. You're researching ancient mechanical engineering texts. He raises an eyebrow. Worried your throne's haunted. Worried it's rigged. You reply. He smiles like he knows something you don't, which is most of the time. Young emperors worry about thrones. Older emperors worry about the people behind them. You nod but continue reading. The diagrams are absurd. Clockwork birds with windpipes, levers hidden under lion paws, seats with false bottoms. There's even one design for a blessing. Mist, some kind of holy vapor released through the throne's backrest. Possibly just glorified incense. Possibly something more. Narcotic. No wonder the last emperor thought he could talk to angels. You become suspicious of everything throne-related. You examine the footrest. You tap the armrests for hollow spots. One afternoon, you fake a limp just to see if anyone rushes to modify the seating arrangement. They do. They're always watching. In a council meeting, you observe the thrones. Influence in full effect. A minor noble from Bithynia begins to drone about border tariffs. You subtly press your heel on a hidden pressure plate Maker showed you. A metallic click sounds. One lion opens its mouth slightly. The noble stops speaking. Everyone shifts in their seats. You lean forward. Please continue. You murmur. He does, but with much more caution. The next day, people begin calling you the listening lion. It's absurd. It's also useful. Fear is a decent spice when mixed with just enough theatrics. You begin to understand why your ancestors spent so much time tricking out the throne room. This was their stage, their prop, their trap. Because in Byzantium, the throne isn't just a seat. It's a weapon. It has crushed rebellions with silence, declared wars with creaks, and once, allegedly, flung a patriarch backward into a baptismal font. You're not sure if that last one's true. You kind of hope it is. And yet, for all its power, the throne also isolates you. When you sit on it, people talk to the empire, not to you. Your name disappears, replaced with titles. Your opinions are filtered through advisors, your decisions, carefully crafted to avoid offense. The throne makes you untouchable, but also unreachable. You miss being looked at like a person, except when Basil looks at you. He still sees you, and he's smirking now, even more than usual. You suspect he's planning something. Macker confirms it. He's been meeting with the metalworkers and the automaton masters. What for? You ask. Macker shrugs. He says he's designing a mechanical tribute for the Emperor's Jubilee. You stare at him. Mechanical? Like a gift? A moving gift? Yes. You have a nightmare that week. You're on the throne, and a bronze statue of Basil walks into the room, bows and then explodes into bees. You wake up in a cold sweat. You begin preemptive inspections of any incoming gifts. Your guards now carry long-handled pokers and wear gloves soaked in vinegar and blessed water. The throne creaks slightly one morning when you shift. You freeze. A pigeon lands. On the windowsill, you jump. You're unraveling. To cope, you turn to humor. You start naming the lions. One is Konstantinos, the other Gregory. You whisper to them when no one's around. Gregory, if you eat another ambassador, I'll have to explain it to the patriarch. Sometimes Macker overhears. He pretends not to. You sketch improvements. For the throne, secret compartments for snacks, a catapult option for boring senators. Cup holders. You never build them. But it helps. Then. It happens. During a ceremony for a visiting prince from Armenia, the throne malfunctions. As you rise, one lion emits a long mournful groan like a cow possessed by ghosts. The prince's translator faints. You pretend nothing happened. The prince pretends to be impressed. Later, Maker finds a bird feather stuck in the throne's inner gears. Pigeon, he says. Probably building a nest. You laugh for 5 straight minutes. Then, you sit on the floor beside the throne and just rest. It doesn't hiss. It doesn't rise. It's just a chair. And for a brief, beautiful moment, you feel like a person again. You're 17 when you lose an eye, but you gain loyalty. Technically, you still have both eyes. But your cousin Zacchaeus does not. And in Byzantium, that kind of thing changes the atmosphere at dinner. It begins with whispers in the porphyry corridors. Zacchaeus has been corresponding with generals in the East. Merely writing letters, he insists. Literary pursuits. Unfortunately, one of those letters includes a sketch of the palace guard rotations and a doodle of you with a question mark over your head. Subtle. A tribunal is called. Not a public trial that would be too dramatic, too permanent. Instead, a quiet gathering of key advisors, clerics, and one disturbingly calm eunuch with a ledger. They review the evidence. The parchment. The parchment's ink. The parchment's tone. And then they look at you. Blinding? The emperor asks flatly. You try to look neutral. Historians still argue whether blinding was chosen for mercy, symbolism, or simply convenience. After all, a blind man can't lead an army. Nor can he rule. And unlike beheading, it leaves room for forgiveness. Theoretically. So as Zacchaeus is taken away, you don't watch. The next day, he's returned to his estate, quietly, politely, with veils over his eyes and silk gloves on his hands. You send him a cask of fig wine. He doesn't respond, and just like that, you're feared, not loved, not respected. Feared. Which inconveniently works. Guards stop questioning orders. Generals start including you in their letters. A noble who once spoke over you during a reading of imperial law now bows so low he risks a head injury. And then remarkably people begin showing up at your door. Loyal people. There's Andronikos, a captain who once laughed at your purple shoes. He offers you 24 cavalrymen, trained to ride silently through the night. There's Kyriake, an abbess who claims she had a vision of you holding a lantern surrounded by wolves. She brings a relic, a jawbone said to ward off treachery. You accept it. It smells like pickled history. And then there's Euphemios. He's a eunuch, late 50s, eyes like smoked glass, and a smile that never touches his cheeks. He doesn't offer you soldiers or relics. He offers you paperwork. Every empire is made of ledgers, he says, placing a scroll on your desk. Control the ink, and the sword follows. He becomes your eyes, your left hand, your shadow. Maker doesn't trust him. Philos really doesn't trust him. You give Euphemios an office. And yet, you don't feel triumphant. The robe weighs heavier now. Not with guilt, though there is some, but with expectation. People see you as ruthless, strategic, capable of sending cousins to quiet estates and nobles into exile. They salute you with deeper reverence. They ask fewer questions, and you begin to miss the questions. At night, you wander the gardens. The air smells of lavender and smoke. You think about Zacchaeus, his letters, his arrogance, his certainty that the robe would pass to him. You think about his eyes, and wonder how close you came to being on that end of history. One night, you visit the small chapel of St. Therapon. You light a candle. You pray, not for forgiveness, but for foresight. There's a fresco above the altar, an old emperor seated between 2 lions, both blindfolded. You stare at it too long. You dream of it. Later, the next week, a delegation arrives from the western provinces. They kneel before you, present gifts, and most significantly, pledge their loyalty. Not to the emperor. To you. It's happening. You're being seen as the next in line. You don't smile. Smiling would make it real. Instead, you nod in order. Pastries for the guests. Lemon, no figs. Soon after, your popularity soars, at least in the abstract. You're the subject of poems recited in salons, mosaics laid in new churches, and a bizarre puppet show in the merchant quarter where a papier match. Isaacos is gently tossed into a well made of cheecclo. Tuz. Macker sees it. Charming, he says, without emotion. But behind the scenes, tension grows. Vezil watches you more intently now. Demetrios hosts fewer parties. And that one general who used to flirt with your steward, he suddenly converts to monastic silence and moves to Mount Athos. Fear is effective, but it's lonely. You send a letter to Isaacos. It's short. I remember the games we played in the old garden. I hope you do too. No reply. During Lent, you organize a procession through the capital. You wear a robe of muted indigo. No purple, today too aggressive. You walk barefoot. You carry a cross. The people line the streets. Some cheer. Some bow. One child offers you a flower, a withered one. You take it anyway. Later, Euphemios whispers. Symbolism cuts both ways. You nod. You don't throw the flower away. One morning, you discover a message under your breakfast tray. No handwriting. Just a symbol. A closed eye. You burn it. You don't tell Macker. That afternoon, your right eye twitches for hours. You begin sleeping in a different room each night. You learn which floorboards creak, which guards snore, which candles burn out first. You keep Isaacos's fig wine sealed, untouched, on your shelf. You order a small painting of him, pre-incident, to be hung in the council chamber. You say it's for reflection. Euphemios approves. Philos does not. Macker says nothing. Still, you rise. You speak with measured grace. You make decisions that no one questions. You decree that the treasury begin minting a new coin with a sunburst halo behind your profile. The engraver hesitates. Should I include both eyes? You pause, then nod. He doesn't ask again. 17, and you've learned something important. In Byzantium, cruelty is remembered, but restraint? Restraint is feared. You're 18, and exile tastes like rosemary and dust. The air smells different outside Constantinople, quieter, drier. Even the wind feels suspicious, as if it's forgotten how to hum through marble colonnades and gold-leafed mosaics. You've been sent away. Not by force, not by decree. Officially, it's a spiritual retreat, a sabbatical for reflection, the kind of thing emperors to be undertake to demonstrate humility. Unofficially, someone wants you gone, out of sight, off the throne, away from the robe, and you agreed, because the alternative might have involved more than fig wine. Your destination is a monastery perched on a cliff above the Sea of Marmara. Its real name is long and forgettable. Everyone just calls it the Watchtower, because that's what it does. It watches the sea, the sky, you. Your first night is silent. No chamberlain, no bells, no choir. Just the creak of wind under your door, and the soft clicking of distant rosary beads. You sleep in a narrow bed made of cedar and discomfort. The mattress smells of old incense and faint regret. In the morning, they shave your head. Not all of it, just enough to remind you who's in charge now. You eat porridge. You sweep stone steps. You copy psalms in a cramped cell that leaks holy water when it rains. Your robe, once woven from the blood of snails and the sighs of courtiers, is replaced with brown wool. Scratchy, honest, you hate it. And yet, you start to breathe again. Monastic life is slow. You wake at dawn, chant, scrub, read. Sometimes, if you're lucky, one of the elder monks tells you a story about a saint who floated above the ground while arguing about fish. You laugh. He doesn't. Your favorite monk is Theoptistos. He's 90, smells like beeswax, and can still carry 2 buckets of wine up the mountain path without losing his temper or his sandals. He calls you lad. You let him one afternoon. While helping you crush grapes for communion wine, he says, "You look tired." You nod. "Good," he grunts. "Now you're useful." You begin writing letters, not to courtiers, not to generals, to yourself. You reflect on your cousin Isaacos, his blindfold, his silence. You think about Basil, probably smiling in your seat right now, sipping from goblets you once eyed with suspicion. You even think about the throne, the purring lions, the golden glare, the way it made you feel like a puppet draped in legend. And you write, "I wore the robe. The robe wore me back." One day, you get a visitor. Unexpected, unannounced. It's a merchant, old, hunched, smells of cloves. He claims to be delivering wine. Theoctistos sends him away. That night, under your pillow, you find a small wooden coin, carved with an eye. You don't sleep. The next morning, the abbot approaches. "Some think your presence here is a threat," he says, not looking at you. "To whom?" You ask. He just shrugs. Later that week, your prayer mat is found soaked with oil. No fire. Yet you ask Theoctistos if accidents happen often in the monastery. He laughs until he wheezes. Then he says, "Accidents are just assassinations that missed." You start sleeping in the cellar, despite the threats, or perhaps because of them. You begin to change. You speak less. You listen more. You learn to make wine properly, without curses or suspicious herbs. Just grapes, stone, time, and pressure. You begin to understand that fermentation is a metaphor. Something must rot before it can become divine. Visitors trickle. In a soldier disguised as a pilgrim brings word that Demetrios is ill. A widow leaves a candle at the chapel with your name scratched on the base. Macker arrives one evening without warning. He sits beside you on a stone bench, hands you a handful of salted almonds, and says, "They're building statues." You raise an eyebrow. "Of you," he adds, "back in the capital. But I'm here." He nods. "Exactly." You return to your cell. You stare at the wall. There's a crack running through the plaster. You never noticed it before. You wonder, did it grow while you were away? The next day, Theoctistos doesn't come to morning prayers. You find him in the vineyard, lying peacefully among the vines. In his hand, a single grape. He's smiling. The funeral is brief. The monks chant. You carry his body because you insisted. It's the first time you've felt worthy of a burden in years. Afterwards, you take his prayer beads, wrap them around your wrist. No one objects. 2 weeks later, the abbot gives you a choice: stay and become one of us, or return. Be what they made you. You walk to the edge of the cliff that night. The sea is endless, swallowing stars. You whisper into the dark. What would Theoctistos do? Probably something stubborn. The next morning, you leave, not in a robe of purple, not in velvet or silk. Just wool. Thinner, lighter, familiar. You carry no luggage, only a vial of wine, a folded letter, and Theoctistos's beads. As you descend the cliff path, the wind follows you. It doesn't whisper this time. It waits. You arrive at the harbor. The ship is small, but fast. The captain doesn't ask your name, only where you're going. You answer, "Home." You're 19, and your wife is married to your executioner. Not officially, of course. Officially, she's married to you. She still calls you my lord in public, still stands beside you at ceremonies, still smiles with just enough restraint to pass as content. But you know, everyone knows. It's the captain of the palace guard. Tall, quiet, always a step too close. Always helping her into carriages, pouring her wine, whispering things in a tone just below scandal, but just above diplomacy. And you sit there. Watching. Smiling. Plotting. Maybe, mostly you're just tired. Their affair begins subtly. A prolonged glance during a parade. A hand lingering too long on a shoulder. A shared laugh in the rose garden, where nothing is funny. You try to confront her once, in your private chamber. She's brushing her hair, slow and deliberate. Are you happy? You ask. She doesn't stop brushing. Doesn't look at you. She says, you used to be a boy. Then she walks out, leaving a trail of rose water and silence. Historians still argue whether imperial marriages were political contracts, passionate alliances, or slow-moving executions wrapped in lace. Yours is none of those. It's performance art, and the audience is growing bored. Euphemios notices, of course. He started pausing when mentioning the captain's name in court memos. Captain Petronas oversaw the palace gate today. With considerable enthusiasm. Philos notices too. He leaves a cryptic note in your cloak pocket. Some thrones have 3 legs. Be careful where you lean. Thanks, Philos. Very helpful. Macker, however, says nothing. Just eyes everyone with the quiet rage of someone who once watched a fire start in a room of wet stone. You pretend not to notice. For months. Because truthfully, you don't have the energy to engage. Because when you wore the robe, you thought it made you powerful. But now you see, it only made you visible. And visibility is not power. It's exposure. Then comes the whisper. From a boy who runs errands in the East Wing. He's nervous, sweating through his tunic. He says, they meet in the tapestry chamber. You raise an eyebrow. He adds, where the sound doesn't carry. You give him a coin and a piece of advice. Run west. Avoid figs. That night you stand outside the tapestry room. You don't enter, you just listen. Nothing scandalous. No gasps, no moans. Just silence, which is worse, because the silence says, they don't need to hide anymore. You start dreaming of exile again, of wine that doesn't taste like suspicion, of prayers said without choreography, of Theoctistos scowling at a vineyard. But you're not that boy anymore. You're the man who returned. And they, your wife, your captain, they think you're still soft, still turned to wool by monastic chants and sea air. They forget what exile taught you. They forget about the crack in the wall. You invite them both to dinner, just the 3 of you. The table is small, intimate, lit by one oil lamp that flickers with every breath. You serve simple food. Pomegranate stew, bread, cheese, nothing suspicious. You eat first. They watch you closely. You say little. You ask nothing. But at the end of the meal, you raise your goblet. To clarity, you say. They hesitate. Then drink. And nothing happens, because the poison isn't in the wine. It's in the moment. The next day, the captain is reassigned to the Anatolian frontier, says Euphemios, calmly. Dangerous out there. You say. Euphemios smiles. That's why he's bringing your wife. You raise an eyebrow. She volunteered. Of course she did. You don't protest. You don't cry. You don't shout to the gods about betrayal. You simply watch her leave. Her face veiled, her posture perfect, not a single glance back. And you? You walk back into the palace alone. You remove your gloves, your belt, your robe. You sit, and you breathe. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, you're alone. Utterly. Beautifully. Alone. You move into a smaller chamber. Less gold, less noise. Just a bed, a desk, and one window with an uncomfortably poetic view of the sea. You write again. No decrees. No orders. Letters to no one. Or maybe to yourself. You write, power is not what we wear. It's what we survive. A week later, the court begins to whisper. They say you've grown colder. Sharper. Wiser. Some say you're preparing for something. Others say you're finally broken. Let them guess. Macker brings you figs one morning. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. They're fresh. You don't eat them, but you smile. You're 20, and you've come back from the dead briefly, not literally. That would be too obvious. More like metaphorically, politically, ceremonially. One moment, you're yesterday's heir, folded neatly into a minor chapter of court gossip. The next, your name's being sung in the Hagia Sophia, echoed down marble corridors by choirs who once forgot your existence. This is Byzantium's favorite trick. Resurrection without burial. It begins with a rumor. Someone in the provinces claims to have seen you not as a man sipping sour wine alone in the secondary palace, but as a glowing figure draped in divine light, healing the sick and quoting scripture with suspicious flair. That version of you reportedly cured a man's limp with a handshake and levitated during sunset. You are, of course, deeply flattered. You are also concerned, because this is how coups start. And occasionally, sainthoods. Historians still argue whether the imperial cult of personality was genuinely spiritual or just a clever branding campaign. You suspect both, because as soon as one town starts calling you the reborn Basileus, others follow. A mosaic appears in Nicaea. A chant is heard in Rhodes. Someone carves your profile into a loaf of bread in Paphlagonia. It sells out in hours. You are now holy pastry. Euphemios calls an emergency meeting. He unfurls a scroll, a list of bishops, nobles, generals, and very enthusiastic iconographers who are spreading your legend. Shall we condemn it? He asks. You think for a moment. No, you say, let them believe I returned from something. He nods, but you see the twitch in his brow. He knows you didn't just return, you arrived. And then, because this is Byzantium, your cousin returns too. Not Demetrios, he's dead now. Poisoned fig, you didn't do it. Probably. This one is Romanos. No. One even knew Romanos had been alive until he rode into the city gates wearing half a cuirass and a beard, so long it looked like it had joined a monastery of its own. He claims he is the true heir, that he faked blindness for 10 years, that he was protected by angels and guarded by wolves and people. Believe him, a little. Enough. You meet him in the Hall of Seals. He kneels. You raise an eyebrow. Rise, you say, curious if his knees still work. They do. You ask, why return now? He answers, the robe called to me. You don't laugh. You don't even blink. Because for a moment, you understand exactly what he means. Romanos is granted a minor title, honorary, decorative, keeps him close. Euphemios glares. Philos chuckles. Maker watches Romanos like he watched your throne, ready to pounce if it tilts. You host a feast. It's grand, uncomfortably so. There are dancers from Antioch, singers from Thrace, a man who juggles icons, briefly. Before being escorted out, the nobles toast you. They toast Romanos. They toast divine returns. You sip water. You notice who drinks deeply, and who fakes it. One senator makes a toast comparing you to Lazarus. You smile. Then you suggest he take a brief vacation to a fortress in the mountains. For health. The empire shifts beneath your feet. You're no longer just the heir. You're a symbol, a mystery, a living contradiction. You have returned, and you're not entirely sure from what. Macker finds you one night gazing at the robe. It hangs behind glass now. Not quite retired. Not quite in use. He asks, will you wear it again? You say, eventually. He nods. Try not to die again. In the following weeks, your appearances are carefully choreographed. You attend mass veiled in fine linen. You say little. You smile less. You're becoming a myth in real time. It's exhausting. You keep waiting for someone to challenge you, to call your bluff, to remind you that you're flesh and bone, not a tale embroidered in gold. No one does. Even Philos stops needling. You, instead, he offers a gift, a book of ancient riddles. Inside the front cover, he's written, the trick to resurrection is never explaining the death. Then, something unexpected. A letter from Isaac Ios. It's brief. I forgive you. Nothing else. You stare at it for a long time. Then you burn it. Not out of spite, but because it feels like an ending and you've just been reborn. One morning, you look into the polished silver mirror. The face looking back at you is older, thinner, sharper. A line forms between your brows. Your hair is darker than it should be. Your eyes have lost the softness of youth, but gained something else. You don't know what. To call it. You go to the chapel. Not to pray, just to sit. You watch the light filter through the stained glass. It paints you in crimson, gold, and yes, even purple. You think of Theoctistos. You think of your wife. You think of a mechanical throne and a blind cousin and a loaf of bread with your face on it. Breathe. You rise. You leave the chapel. Alive. You're 21, and your feet are cold on golden tiles. The Hall of the Chrysotriclinos, the Golden Hall, lives up to its name. Walls shimmer with mosaics, ceilings glitter like the inside of a divine beehive, and the floor beneath your feet is polished so smooth you once saw a senator slip and take down 3 deacons with him. Now, you're the one walking that floor. And for some reason, your toes are freezing. You wore the boots. You wore the robe. And still, the chill bites through like winter. Never got the message that you're supposed to be important. You pace. Slowly. Deliberately. There's an art to imperial pacing. You must appear thoughtful, not worried. Contemplative, not constipated. Euphemios. Briefs you in hushed tones, reading from a scroll that seems longer every day. Rebellions in the provinces. Grain shortages in the islands. A bishop claiming he saw the Virgin Mary riding a goat near Antioch. You nod occasionally. Your feet remain cold. I can bring you felt insoles, Euphemios offers. No, you reply. Let the cold keep me honest. He says nothing, but one of his eyebrows quietly files a complaint. Historians still argue whether the Golden Hall was a place of true governance or just political theater. You decide it's both. Because today, you'll be welcoming the ambassadors from Venice, hosting the annual tribute ceremony from Trebizond, and sitting for a portrait that will be carved into a plate no one will ever eat from. The day begins with a procession. Bells, incense, chanting. You walk beneath banners bearing your seal, down corridors lined with guards who hold their spears at angles mathematically designed to impress. At the end of the hall, your throne waits. Not the mechanical one. This is the humble throne, only slightly gilded, barely jewel-encrusted. Austerity chic. You sit. It creaks. You pretend it didn't. The ambassadors enter. They bow low. One kisses your ring. Another presents a box of candied almonds arranged into a portrait of the city skyline. You appreciate the effort, even if the column of Constantine looks oddly phallic. You thank them. In Greek. Then in Latin. Then pause. And throw in a few words in Old Church Slavonic, just to see them squirm. They do. Later, you listen to petitions. Widow asks for tax relief. A merchant accuses a bishop of smuggling. A farmer presents you with a turnip shaped like the Virgin's face. You admire it. You do not comment on the uncanny resemblance to your Aunt. Each time, you respond with calm precision. Not because you're wise, because your feet are still cold, and cold feet keep your mind sharp. In the afternoon, the mosaics start whispering. Not literally, but standing in this hall long enough, surrounded by shimmering saints and frozen angels, you start to feel like the art is judging you. Each glittering eye a reminder that emperors die, but tiles are forever. You think about that. You think about the emperor who tried to remodel this hall and was struck by lightning. You think about the one who added a giant eagle mosaic and then died falling off a balcony shaped like a beak. Superstition? Sure, but in Byzantium, superstition is just history in waiting. You slip away briefly. Just to breathe. You find a side corridor with a window view of the sea. It glitters under the sun. Boats slide like silver fish across the water. And for a moment, the city feels Small dot manageable dot beautiful dot. You press your hand to the cool marble of the sill. Dot it's warmer than the floor. Then, a message arrives, a scroll, sealed in wax shaped like a lion's paw. You open it. Dot inside. The goat has returned to the garden. You sigh. Dot this is not code you recognize. You ask Euphemios. He squints. Could be a metaphor for scandal, or victory, or possibly cheese. You send a reply. Fence the garden, milk the goat. Watch the gate. He nods. Very imperial. Back to the hall. The tribute bearers from Trebizond arrive. They kneel. They present gold, spices, and a flute carved from a bird bone. It's unsettling, but impressive. You thank them with a nod that communicates centuries of inherited gravitas. Bow so deeply, you wonder if they'll ever get up. As the sun sets, candles are lit. The gold tiles flicker. The saints on the walls glow like they've remembered your name. You walk once more across the floor. Deliberately. Quietly. Still cold. You stop. Look up. And say, if this hall ever warms up, I'll know I'm lying to myself. Philos from the corner says, or that someone finally fixed the underfloor heating. You smile. That night, in your chambers, you soak your feet in warm water scented with pine resin and rosemary. The servant swears it helps with humility. You're not sure that's what's sore. Still, it feels nice. You stare into the water. The ripples reflect your face, then dissolve it. You whisper to the empty room. Is it bad that I miss the vineyard? Number 1 answers, but the water keeps steaming. And for the first time that day, your toes remember what warmth feels like. Word count, 1099. You're 22, and you may have accidentally crowned a goat. It starts innocently enough. A spring festival, a new moon, a slightly too sober jester, and a sudden rainstorm that drives everyone into the backup ceremonial chamber, the one with the weird echo and the mural of St. Nicholas that looks permanently offended. The festival is supposed to honor St. George. There's incense, pastries, dancers, and for some reason live animals. A pageant of divine metaphors. Allegory on hooves. Enter the goat. His name is Zoilos. He's wearing a laurel wreath and tiny silver bells. Someone no one will admit. Who draped the cloth over his back that looks suspiciously like a retired imperial robe? Purple, fringed, gold-threaded. You don't notice him at first. You're busy being gently accosted by a noblewoman who insists her great-grandmother nursed an emperor and should therefore be given a vineyard. Then, the crowd begins to chant. At first, it's general merriment. Then it turns specific. Hail, Zoilos! Hail the purple! Hail the bleeding heir! You look up and yes, there he is. Standing on the low dais, next to the silver candlesticks, chewing something unidentifiable. Crown. Historians still argue whether it was meant as satire, sabotage, or just the natural chaos of court entertainment colliding with alcohol and livestock. But for 15 full minutes, the goat becomes more popular than you. Someone tosses flowers. Someone else sings a hymn. The choir joins in. Philos is convulsing in laughter. Euphemios is not. Macker whispers, "Shall I remove him?" You shake your head. He hasn't insulted anyone yet. Later, the event is scrubbed from official records. The goat is relocated to a monastery farm for reflection. The robe is burned ceremonially, and you pretend to be amused, but deep down, you feel something you're not proud of. Jealousy. Not because Zoilos looked better in purple, because Zoilos didn't care. The next day, you receive a package. Inside, a small wooden goat. No note. You place it on your desk. It becomes a paperweight, and a warning. In the weeks that follow, the court becomes more theatrical. Nobles arrive dressed in increasingly elaborate silks. One wears a belt made entirely of ivory dice. Another carries a falcon, in full imperial livery. Everyone is performing now, including you, especially you. You give speeches. You host banquets. You inaugurate a fountain shaped like the sun god Helios. That doesn't quite work. It sprays sideways, soaking half the clergy. They bless you anyway. And yet beneath the fanfare, there's tension. Your scribes begin misplacing documents. A statue of your great-grandfather has defaced someone. Replaces his sword with a spoon. Rumor spreads that you eat goat meat exclusively. You do not. But you do find yourself whispering to the wooden goat on your desk. What would you do? Zoilos doesn't answer. He never does. One evening, Maker finds you on the palace roof, staring at the stars. He says, "They've started calling you the Goat Emperor." You sigh. At least goats climb. He nods and fall. You begin rewriting. Court ceremony protocol. Less gold. Fewer titles. More clarity. You ban symbolic animals from official events. The next morning, someone smuggles in a swan. You don't ask why. You just nod, and it disappears. Pailos. Gives you a poem. It begins. The Pew. Emperor dreamed he was a goat. Woke to find the goat still ruling. You hate it. You keep it anyway. Euphemios is less poetic. He hands you a report. Unrest in the eastern provinces. Complaints from the Navy. Questions about grain prices. Then, softly, they think you're slipping. You respond. Do they laugh? He nods. Then I'm still in control. The thing is secretly, privately, you enjoyed it. Not the goat's ascension, but the absurdity, the release. For a moment, the robe didn't matter. The bloodline didn't matter. No scrolls, no plots. Just bells on a goat and people laughing together. You miss that. You sneak out one night, hooded and plain. You visit the goat farm. Yes, really. Zoilos is there. He looks older, grayer, but still profoundly unbothered. You kneel. You offer him a date. He ignores it, walks away, finds a patch of grass, lays down. You sit beside him for a while. You say nothing. Then, you carried it better than I expected. He bleats, which feels like agreement. Return before dawn. The guards don't notice. You leave a second wooden goat on your desk. This one's carved with a crown, not out of mockery, but as a reminder that sometimes the kingdom needs absurdity, and sometimes the emperor does too. You're 23, and the eunuch runs the empire. Not officially, of course. Officially, you're still the emperor. Still wearing the robe. Still sitting on the throne, and pretending that every bow and every prayer and every speech is your own. But behind the curtains, literally and figuratively, Euphemios moves the levers. It begins subtly. You stop reading all your briefings, because, well, they've doubled in length, and the ink makes your eyes water. He offers to summarize. You agree. Then he starts drafting your decrees. Just suggestions at first. But they're excellent suggestions. Efficient, elegant, slightly terrifying. Next, he starts managing your appointments. Rearranging your audiences, selecting your meals. Once, you find your slippers have been replaced with more appropriate ones. He doesn't even ask. He just edits your life. And you let him. Historians still argue whether Euphemios was a genius, a tyrant, or a tragic necessity. You know the truth. He's all three. He never raises his voice. Never panics. He walks like a shadow and speaks like a lullaby dipped in vinegar. You once saw him reduce a general to tears. With just a sigh, you were impressed. You were also terrified. Phalas notices the shift. He gives you a scroll one morning. Blank except for a single sentence. He who signs everything signs nothing. You nod. You sign a new naval treaty, that afternoon dictated by Euphemios. Macer grows more restless. He sharpens his sword more than usual. Stares at doors longer than necessary. When Euphemios enters the room, Macer does not bow. He never did. But now the stillness is pointed. You ask him once, "Do you think I've lost control?" He responds, "I think control is a myth, like dry figs or loyal cousins." You both laugh, but not for long, because the empire is thriving. Ships arrive on time. Markets hum, bakers bake, and somehow, you're receiving less death threats. It's suspicious. Euphemios has a gift for order. Even his ink is neater than yours. His scrolls arrive folded with terrifying symmetry. His footfalls never echo. He smells faintly of cedar and calculation. And everyone obeys him. One day, a bishop refuses a palace summons. By nightfall, he's begging for forgiveness, barefoot and tear-streaked, outside your chapel. He says your name, but he's staring at Euphemios. You confront him once. In the hall of maps, you're tracing the border of Armenia with your fingertip, pretending to consider a campaign. He enters. Silent as a question, you say, "This isn't how it was meant to be." He replies, "It's how it needs to be." You ask, "For whom?" He answers, "For everyone." You don't argue, because deep down, you know he's probably right, but it's maddening. You miss giving commands that matter. Miss feeling like your own shadow belongs to you. You start waking at odd hours, walking the halls barefoot, avoiding mirrors. You catch your reflection, once tired, tense, expression blurred by candlelight. You whisper, "Who rules?" The reflection does not answer. You try to assert yourself. You issue an edict, minor symbolic. A tax exemption for fig vendors. During festival weeks. It's immediately overturned. Quietly, efficiently. You find the amended scroll on your desk, signed with your own seal, which you never remember giving. You ask Euphemios, "Did you forge this?" He says, "Of course not. I used a stamp." You stare at him. He smiles faintly. "I serve your will," he says. Even when you forget it, you begin planting notes in your own scrolls, small markings, secret initials. A sigil from your childhood. When those symbols appear in court decrees, you know he's copying. When they don't, you know he's rewriting. Most of them appear. One does not. It was a clause limiting treasury access to 3 named officials. Instead, the decree expands it to 4. You never named a 4th. You don't ask. You already know. Philos grows quieter. He begins sending you parables. Riddles. One reads, "When the bird no longer sings, do not blame the cage, blame the man who fed it into silence." You think about that for a week. Macker starts sleeping outside your door again. He says it's for tradition. You know it's for something else. He MIOS approaches you one morning. In the sunlit corridor between the chapel of St. Thecla and the Mosaic Garden. He bows. He says, "It's time for you to rest more. Let me carry the weight." You reply, "Do I look tired?" He looks up gently. "Yes." Then he hands you a list of ceremonial duties. Reduced, condensed, pre-managed. You pocket it. You never read it. That evening, you return to your desk. You find your wooden goat. Its crown is missing. You smile. Then, you place it atop a parchment and write, "Even shadows need permission." The next morning, you rise early, earlier than Euphemios. You sign 15 decrees, all yours, all slightly strange. One appoints a retired monk as admiral of the kitchen fleet. Another mandates a day of public storytelling in every province. The last simply declares, "The emperor speaks." You seal them all, send them out, and wait. Euphemios does not confront you, not directly. But the next time he enters the throne room, he bows slightly deeper than usual. And behind his back, his fists are clenched. You smile, cold tiles underfoot, gold above. And for a moment, your name echoes in the chamber, not as myth, but as a voice, your own. You're 24, and your son betrays you at Vespers. You shouldn't be surprised. The signs were all their shifting allegiances, polite evasions, a sudden interest in the palace guard's roster. He even started praying more. Always a bad sign in Byzantium. Nothing says, "I'm plotting treason," quite like an overzealous embrace of liturgy. Still, it stings, because you remember his first steps, his first words, his first toy sword carved from olive wood and painted gold. by a hopeful nursemaid who called him our little lion. Now the lion is sharpening his teeth on your throne. It happens in the chapel. The light is dim, filtered through stained glass shaped like a wheel of saints. The candles flicker as the choir chants psalms. You're seated near the front, cloaked in your ceremonial purple, listening to the rise and fall of voices trained to soothe even as they prepare to stab. Your son enters slowly, reverently, wearing robes just a little too heavy for a regular vespers. Your heart does not race. Not yet, but Mocker, standing behind you, shifts his weight. That's enough. The room fills with incense and intent. He kneels. He kisses your hand. He whispers, "Father, I've come to serve." You nod. And behind his eyes, you see it. Not love. Not fear, but calculation. Historians still argue whether palace betrayals were driven by ambition, divine visions, or sheer boredom. You know it's none of those. It's inheritance. In Byzantium, sons don't inherit robes. They seize them. Later that night, you find a scroll left near your bedside, your seal. But not your hand. Inside, a draft decree naming your son, co-emperor. Unapproved. Unsigned. But ready, just in case. You don't confront him. You observe. At court, he speaks more often. His voice steady, his metaphors imperial. He references battles he never fought, reforms he never wrote. Yet the court leans in. They remember his charm, his eyes, his mother's smile. You recognize the strategy because it's yours. You invite him to dinner. He accepts. Easily. He arrives on time. Wears a ring you haven't seen since Euphemios disappeared. Found it in the old library. He says, you nod. You don't ask what else he found. The meal is cordial. Quail, barley stew, almond cake. He praises the pastry chef. Compliments the wine. At one point, he says, when you were my age. And trails off. You finish for him. I lost an eye, a cousin, and a wife. He chuckles. Hopefully I'll be more fortunate. You clink cups. That night, Macker tightens the guard rotations. You don't order it. He does it anyway. He knows. Everyone knows. The next day, your son attends a council meeting without you. When asked, he says, the emperor is meditating. You are not. You're in the garden, watching the peacocks fight over a fig. You smile bitterly. You used to think the robe made the emperor. Then you thought it was the throne. Then the scrolls. Now you're not sure it matters. Philos sends you a letter, one line. A torch passed too early burns the hand. You send him back a fig. Dried, bitter. He'll understand. Your son proposes a new edict. Expanded trading privileges for Venetian merchants. It's well written. Strategic. Clever. You don't sign it. You rewrite it, adding a clause that demands symbolic tribute to the emperor. Just enough to remind everyone who still rules. He doesn't argue, but his hand trembles slightly. When he takes the parchment, you notice. One evening, he joins you at the chapel again. You pray in silence. He kneels beside you. Then softly he says, I don't want to replace you. You murmur, then don't try. Silence stretches between you like a drawn bowstring. You both rise. You remember what Theoctistos said once. Long ago, crushing grapes in the monastery. Young vines grow fast. That's why you prune them. You wonder if he meant metaphorically. You summon your son privately. Offer him a journey. A pilgrimage. To the eastern provinces. To reflect. To represent. To create distance. He smiles. Asks, voluntary? You reply, do you want it to be? He bows. 3 days later he's gone, with an escort and a priest. And a new robe, not purple but close. Whispers follow you like moths. Exile? Reform? Revenge? You say nothing. You sit in your chamber, alone again. The candle flickers. You unroll an old scroll, your own handwriting, barely legible. A letter to yourself, back when you wore the robe for the first time. It ends with, try not to disappear. You Smile. And whisper to the quiet, still trying. You're 25, and the purple room is very, very quiet. The porphyry, the sacred chamber where you were born, wrapped in gold-threaded silence and prophetic expectations, hasn't changed. The marble glows with that soft, impossible hue, somewhere between dusk and dried blood. The walls still pulse with history, but now they also echo. No footsteps, no midwives, no choirs, just you. And the robe, folded neatly on a pedestal. You haven't worn it in weeks. Not since your son left. Not since the court began referring to you in more ceremonial tones. His illustrious majesty, the ever-august, the retiring son. Retiring, you're still here, still breathing. But the world's moved into whispers again, and you recognize the pattern. The same rhythm that swallowed your father, your cousin, your enemies, and once, almost, you visit the room alone. No guards, no advisors, not even Macker. Just you and the quiet. And the robe, waiting like a patient ghost. You run your fingers across the fabric. It's softer than you remember. Or maybe your hands have hardened. You hold it up. It shimmers in the half-light. You do not put it on. Historians still argue whether the porphyry was a holy place or a stage. You know it's both. You were born here, not in blood and screaming, but in ceremony and silence, swaddled in expectations, blessed by hands that couldn't hold truth for long. And now you return not as heir or ruler or myth, but as something in between, a man who wore the robe, survived the robe, and walked away. You sit on the edge of the pedestal. The robe draped beside you like an old friend. You close your eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, you let the quiet take you. You imagine you never left the monastery, that Theoktistos is still alive, grumbling about wine and sandals, that Isaacio still walks the garden with you, both eyes sharp. Neither of you kings. You imagine Zoilos the goat is still wandering the palace halls, utterly indifferent to politics. You imagine your wife beside you, not in betrayal, but in understanding. And your son not with a dagger in hand, but with your letters folded in his tunic, still believing there's time. A breeze enters through the narrow window slit. It ruffles the robe. You reach out, gently press it flat. And then you say softly, "Not yet." You rise. Walk to the door. Turn back only once, not to look at the robe. To listen. But the purple room remains still. As it always was. As it always will be. You return to your chambers. You draft 3 letters. 1 to a general offering a command he never expected. 1 to a widow restoring land taken unjustly. And 1 to your son. Just 4 words. Keep your blade clean. You sign them all with your full name. No title. Just the name your nursemaid whispered before anyone cared who you were. That night, Macker finds you asleep in your chair, candle burned low, scrolls stacked like feathers. He does not wake you. He simply places your wooden goat beside you and waits. Word count 1053. Wing down 300 words, and so you sit. As the candlelight fades. The empire quiet now, not gone, just breathing softer. The corridors fall into stillness. No guards shuffle, no sandals echo. No whispered conspiracies linger in the corners of your chambers. Outside, the sea glimmers like a mirror, reflecting stars that have watched empires rise and fall for longer than anyone remembers. You close your eyes, feel the weight of the robe imaginary now resting gently on your shoulders, no longer pressing, no longer demanding. Just fabric, just memory. Somewhere in the distance, bells toll. Not for alarm, just time passing, as it always has. You think of Theoktistos, of his vineyard, of the patience in crushed grapes and slow fermenting, of Philos and his riddles, still scribbled in margins you never erased, of Macker, sharpening blades not for war, but for trimming the thorns from your path, of Zoilos, Isaac Ios, of your son, And if you dot the boy born in purple, dot the man who wore it, dot the figure who stepped away from it. Without vanishing dot, your breath slows. The wind outside hums against the stained glass dot, and for the first time in many years, you are not performing, not calculating dot, not ruling. You are simply resting. And somewhere, in the purple stillness of history, your story exhales. The robe is folded, the doors are closed, the lights are dimmed. Sleep now, sleep and dream.